The day I buried my mother was the day I stopped believing in her. It started with a locked wooden box hidden inside her closet, a box no one was supposed to find. But I did. And what I discovered inside it tore our entire family apart. The woman I thought I knew, loving, soft-spoken, a schoolteacher, wasn't even her real identity. And the man I called father? He had secrets of his own. But the worst part? I think I understand now why she ran away from her old life. And why she never told us who she really was. My name is Clara Dawson, and for most of my life, I believed I came from a quiet, stable home. My mother, Ruth, was a respected schoolteacher. My father, Leonard, ran a small but successful bookstore in Vermont. We weren't rich, but we were comfortable. More importantly, we were safe. Or so I thought. The story I'm about to tell you began on the day of my mother's funeral. It was a gray morning in early October. The sky hung low, thick with clouds that refused to break. The funeral service had been short. Intimate. My father wept quietly, his head bowed. My brother, James, didn't say much. He never did. And I stood there, numb, trying to hold everything together for everyone else. After the burial, we returned home. That night, I couldn't sleep. Maybe it was grief. Maybe it was something else. A strange tension pulled at me, like a thread I hadn't noticed before. Around midnight, I got up and wandered into my parents' bedroom. I don't know what I was looking for. Comfort, maybe. Proof that she had really been here, alive. I opened her closet, hoping to find her favorite blue cardigan. Instead, I found something far more troubling. Behind a stack of shoeboxes, pressed tightly against the wall, was a heavy wooden box. It looked old, handmade, with no keyhole and no visible latch. Just a groove on the side. I pulled it out carefully and set it on the bed. The moment I touched it, I knew this wasn't something ordinary. There was a chill to it, like it had been waiting. Watching. When I finally pried it open, I found 5 things: a faded photograph, a forged ID, a letter addressed to Maggie, a small silver revolver, and a newspaper clipping with a headline that read, "Local woman disappears, foul play suspected." The woman in the photo was my mother. But the name on the ID wasn't Ruth Dawson. It was Margaret Adele Keene. And that was the moment I realized my mother had been living a second life. I used to believe my mother, Margaret, was the kind of woman novels were written about, gentle, graceful, warm. The sort who knew how to fix a hem with one hand and soothe a crying child with the other. We lived in a quiet New England town called Fair Hollow, nestled between endless green hills and sleepy neighborhoods. Everyone knew everyone. And everyone loved Margaret Hughes. She taught Sunday school, brought casseroles to sick neighbors, and organized book clubs with precision. My father, Robert, was quieter, more reserved, an accountant by trade. I was their only child, Clara. Our life, while not grand, felt perfect, or so I thought. As a child, I never questioned why we didn't have many relatives. Or why we never traveled back to where my mother grew up. Any questions were met with tight smiles and vague answers. "Oh, darling," she'd say. "My past is nothing but old shadows." There was no family album before me. No photographs of her as a girl, no stories about her parents or siblings. There was no family album before me. No photographs of her as a girl, no stories about her parents or siblings. My father once said, "Some people like to leave the past behind. It's their way of surviving." I accepted it. I had to. We were happy, weren't we? I remember how my mother used to braid my hair every morning before school. She'd hum old lullabies, ones I'd never heard anywhere else. Her voice, soft like falling snow, filled the room with comfort. I once asked her what language she was singing in. "Old family words," she said, brushing it off with a smile. From long, long ago. The older I grew, the more I noticed her strange habits. Like how she always locked the basement door with a heavy padlock, even though there was nothing down there but dusty furniture and holiday decorations, or so I believed. Or how she'd stiffen any time someone brought up certain cities, like Chicago or Baltimore. When I was 12, a man came to our door. He was in a black suit, looked like he hadn't slept in days. His eyes scanned my face like he was looking for something, or someone. "Is Margaret home?" he asked. My mother stepped out before I could reply. Her expression didn't change. But her eyes, they darkened in a way I'd never seen. "You have the wrong house," she said firmly. He didn't argue. Just nodded slowly and walked away. I never saw him again. When I asked her who he was, she answered, "An old mistake. Best forgotten." By the time I was 17, I'd stopped asking questions. But curiosity still simmered beneath the surface. Especially on quiet nights when I'd catch her staring into the fireplace, clutching a worn locket she thought I didn't know about. She wore it only when she thought I wasn't watching. A faded silver chain with a dark red stone in the center, nothing inside, no photo, no inscription. Just that blood-colored gem that always looked cold. Then came the accident. I was 24. She was driving to the next town over and never made it past the bend. Slippery road, rainy night. At least, that's what the officer said. Losing her shattered me. I inherited the house, her belongings, and a single envelope labeled, "For Clara, when I'm gone." Inside it? Only a key. An old iron key unlike any I'd seen before. And that's when the real story began. The old brass key stayed hidden in Clara's coat pocket for days. Every time she gripped it, cold and slightly bent, it hummed with questions. Who was that man? Why did he know her mother's maiden name? And why had no one ever mentioned him before? One rainy Thursday, curiosity cracked Clara's restraint. Her mother, now slower and more forgetful, had gone to bed early after her medications. Clara tiptoed to the back of the house, heart pounding, and unlocked the basement door, a door her mother had always kept bolted. It creaked open slowly. Dust hung in the air like ghosts waiting to be seen. A single bulb swung above, casting trembling shadows across wooden crates, old furniture, and cardboard boxes sealed with tape yellowed by time. She stepped down, the wooden stairs moaning under her weight. She found a trunk, oak wood with iron corners, locked with a rusty clasp. The key slid in perfectly. Inside were photographs, black and white, stained at the corners. A young woman with fierce eyes stared back in multiple frames, her mother, unmistakably. But the man beside her wasn't Clara's father. Clara squinted at the date, 1986. This was a full 2 years before her parents supposedly met. Clara blinked. That was her mother's name, yes, but not the place. Her entire life, her mother had claimed to be born in a quiet town in Vermont. No family. No past. Why lie? As Clara dug deeper, she found documents in French, a marriage certificate, a police report, and then, her breath caught, a missing child report. The report was dated 1991. The child's name was also Clara Elise Moreau. She sat down hard, her pulse roaring in her ears. It couldn't be. Was this a twisted coincidence? Or had her mother kidnapped her? The photo attached to the missing child report showed a 2-year-old with big eyes and a dimpled chin, the same baby picture her mother kept on the hallway wall. The same one Clara thought was her. Suddenly, every whispered phone call, every mailbox left unopened, every anxious glance over her mother's shoulder, clicked into place. Her mother hadn't just been protective. She had been hiding. That night, Clara didn't sleep. She stared at her bedroom ceiling, piecing together a life that had always felt just a little staged. At dawn, Clara scanned the police report again. A name jumped out, Detective Henri Blanchard. A Paris-based investigator who had filed the report after the father of the missing child had died in an accidental fall. It wasn't an accident. The report alluded to domestic abuse, and the mother, Anna Moreau, had been a key suspect. She had fled the country with her daughter before a trial could begin. Clara shivered. Was this woman her savior, or her kidnapper? The next day, Clara made an appointment at the passport office. Her hands shook as she checked the box, applying for first-time passport. And under place of birth, she paused. She didn't know anymore. The morning sun poured through the windows, but it didn't warm me. I sat across from her at the kitchen table. My mother stirred her tea slowly, her pale hands trembling, whether from age, medication, or the weight of the lies she carried, I didn't know. My voice cracked. Who is Anna Moreau? Her spoon clinked against the cup. She didn't look up. Didn't speak. Just froze. I dropped the papers on the table, photocopies of the documents I'd found. The photos. The police report. The missing child alert. Her eyes flicked to them. And then, finally, to me. The silence between us stretched until I couldn't bear it anymore. Did you steal me? My throat tightened. Am I not who I thought I was? She looked suddenly tired, so tired, like she'd aged 10 years in 1 second. And then, in a voice barely louder than a whisper, she said, I didn't steal you. I saved you. I leaned back. The words felt like ice water down my spine. She reached for the papers, then for my hand. I flinched. Please, listen to me, she whispered. Yes, my name is Anna Moreau. Yes, you were born in France. And yes, I took you and ran. I stared at her. Your father was a monster. Not the man I raised you to believe in. The man in the photo? His name was Luke. He beat me, Clara. Repeatedly. I lost 2 babies before you because of him. She wiped a tear from her cheek. When I realized I was pregnant again, with you, I promised myself I would never let you grow up in fear. The night I left, He had tried to choke me because I spilled wine on his suit. You were 2 years old. You were crying in the other room. That was the last straw. I wanted to believe her. But how could I? Why didn't you tell me? I was shaking. Why build my whole life on a lie? Because if they found us, they would have sent you back to his family, she said quietly. His family had money. Power. They covered up everything. You would have grown up among wolves. I couldn't breathe. My whole identity, my name, my childhood, my memories, felt stolen, or at least borrowed. She continued, voice breaking. I changed everything. Our names. Our location. I worked night shifts. I scrubbed toilets. I built a life for you, one where you never had to be afraid of your own blood. She took my hand again. This time, I didn't pull away. I don't regret saving you. But I regret lying to you. Every day. I sat in silence, staring at the woman I'd called Mom my whole life. She wasn't who I thought she was. But maybe she had never been a villain. Maybe she was a survivor. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd lost something I'd never get back. I sat alone in the attic, the air thick with the weight of generations. The light from my phone flickered over the dust-covered boxes, each one a time capsule. But nothing prepared me for the last file I found. Tucked beneath my grandfather's army trunk, wrapped in an old velvet cloth, was a faded diary, my grandmother's. Her words, they shook the foundation of everything I thought I knew. I begged him to stop. I told him the children didn't deserve this secret, this burden. But he said it was for the family's honor. That no one must ever know what he did in 1953. The entries chronicled abuse, manipulation, and the terrifying truth. My grandfather had not only covered up a crime, he had committed it. The young maid who disappeared that year, the scandal that was hushed with money and influence, it wasn't just a rumor. My grandmother had known. She had stayed silent. Out of fear. Out of protection for her children. Out of shame. And we had inherited that silence like an invisible curse passed down through bloodlines. I took the diary and walked back to the main house. My mother and aunt sat quietly in the drawing room, the remnants of the storm still hanging between us. I placed the diary on the table and slid it across to them. Read it, I whispered. Read what your mother couldn't say out loud. They did. Page by trembling page. At one point, my aunt burst into tears. My mother sat frozen, her face pale, her mouth slightly open as if caught in a silent scream. When they finished, there was silence. Long, heavy, suffocating silence. Until my mother said, almost inaudibly, we lived our lives guarding his memory. Worshipping him. All this time, we were protecting a monster. We knew we couldn't keep this buried any longer. I offered to handle the next step. Not for revenge. Not for fame. But because silence had ruled our family for too long. We contacted the local authorities. Shared the documents. The case, of course, was far too old to bring legal justice. The people directly involved had long passed away. But the police promised to open a historical investigation. A week later, the newspapers ran the story. and uncovers disturbing secret buried for decades. And the world finally knew what we had hidden for generations. At the funeral, people whispered. Some glared. Others offered sympathy, unsure of what to say. We didn't pretend anymore. We didn't give the grand, noble eulogy. Just a simple goodbye. No lies. No rewritten legacy. That night, as I walked alone to the hill overlooking our estate, I felt lighter. Not free. Not yet. But lighter. I knew that truth came at a cost. That lifting the veil meant exposing not just a secret, but generations of pain. But I also knew this. Silence may protect reputations, but it destroys souls. So if you're watching this and your family has its own shadows, its own whispers, its own unspeakable truths, ask yourself, is the silence protecting you? Or just delaying the storm?